Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. We're just going to hang out for a couple minutes, let people microwave their leftovers and make their sandwich and hop in. So sit tight. Well, how's your day going, Michelle?
It's good. I'm ready for
Good.
lunch. I already ate
I hear,
once today and I'm ready for more food. So
I
can't
know I had a
wait.
big bowl of oatmeal. I was like, I gotta be prepared for this. So it'll tide me
We're
over for
ready.
now. Yeah. All right, awesome. Well, I'll just start introing us a little bit. Everybody who's here, thanks for joining, or if you're joining in later, super glad that you're here. Today we're going to be talking about what we're calling finding the right fit. How to find the right company for you. And I think this is a unique framework that people don't always think about and is so important. So, to introduce myself, I'm Sarah. I am a recruiter here at Celarity. I've been here for about a year. But prior to that, I've got about 10 years of experience as a resume writer and career coach and all of those things. So, I'm joined by my lovely colleague.
Hey, I'm Michelle. I'm also a recruiter here at Celarity and I've been here around 3 years. So super excited to chat more about this with you.
Yeah, you're a pro. So, just to give people a heads up, obviously we're on LinkedIn, so there's that comment section. We'll both kind of try to keep an eye on it. If you either have questions for us or just comments or suggestions or things that have worked well for you around this topic, we definitely encourage that. But otherwise, if we don't get to your questions, one of us will get to them after the fact. So still feel free. And of course, feel free to connect with either of us, both of us on LinkedIn afterwards as well. If you're starting that job search process or just have questions about things. We really like to make ourselves available, and this is a fun topic for us, but a hard topic for many of us. So if you've got your leftovers ready, are you ready to dive in, Michelle?
Yeah, let's do it. And I feel like the big thing that, a lot of people are probably wondering is like, how do you set yourself up for success when you're starting out your job search? So I think that's a good spot to start.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is where people maybe hurry things. And it's really the best place to slow down is really thinking about what you need to be successful. And some of that includes obvious things. Do you need remote and love remote, or do you actually really miss being in office? Do you like having a structured, 8:30 to 5 schedule, or do you really thrive in having that flexibility to take a longer workout class or take your kids places? Think about those things and what is a real deal breaker for you. Obviously, pay, that's what we all think about, but that's just one fraction of it. Part of that total compensation also includes benefits outside of just that salary. And then the other thing to think about is, we all want to make the most money we can make, but sometimes there are areas that you might be able to wiggle in. If you know you really want to work at 3M, do you feel comfortable maybe taking a step in a role or in your pay just to get your foot in the door? Sometimes that's a strong approach if you're able to swing it. So those are some of those initial things that people always think about. A couple that I would throw in the mix too are, how do you like to be led and managed? I think that's really important. What kind of managerial style do you need, or what does really turn you off? The other thing I think about too would be like team setting. Do you love being independent, or do you want something where you have a lot of collaboration, a lot of interfacing with team members? Because if you fall in one of those two, you might want something very different. The other thing I throw in the mix too is thinking about, do you work well sort of head down in the work, or do you want something that's more strategy or external or client facing? Because sometimes people really like to just kind of have their head down and do the work, and then they end up getting into a very outward facing role and they're really unhappy. So know what you need. So those are a few that just I think about a lot. Do you have others that you would throw in the mix too?
Yeah, I feel like this is huge because otherwise you're kind of just like throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping it sticks.
Yes.
And you get a job offer and you're like, yeah, it's not really what I want. So definitely a big topic and just important to get that clarity. I think the biggest thing for me is like flexibility is huge right now, especially in a remote setting. So think about like what kind of flexibility is important to you. For me, I have a dog that I love to walk every day at 4:30. So I'm like, okay, I need a job that lets me do that.
Yeah.
Other people don't. So that's totally fine. Or maybe it's an industry that you really want to get into and kind of getting that clarity on like what's exciting to you. So at the end of the day, when you get an offer, you can make sure it's something that is exactly right for what you're looking for. And then write those things down, so that way when
Yeah.
you get a job offer and you have kind of rose-colored glasses, you're able to look back and say, like, I said this is what I want. How does it stack up with what's in front of me? So yeah, definitely important to just get a ton of clarity before you even start applying.
Yeah. Yeah. Lay the groundwork, get the game plan, especially when you maybe get a little excited or end up deviating, or you're getting frustrated and you rush something. I think having that to look back on. And even as it changes over the years, and that's going to happen from one role to the next as you get in and learn along the way. So I think that's really smart. So I guess segueing off of that, after you kind of figured out what you as a person, as a dynamic whole person need, the next aspect, of course, is researching the company. When you've kind of honed in on maybe a handful of companies that you want to target, which is definitely an approach that we kind of all recommend, is really being targeted and specific. Because you've done the time to identify those needs. So some of the obvious things, looking at a company's website, of course, reading their mission statement, I think is really insightful, regardless of the industry. Getting a vibe on their values, that sort of thing, gives some good insight. Other things that I like to do is start researching people on LinkedIn. You can or cannot message them. I think that can be a useful tactic if you're being really serious. It looks really good to take that initiative, or even just saying, hey, I just sent in my application, wanted to give you a heads up to keep an eye out. But just the research itself is useful, kind of seeing where people have come from, prior industries, prior companies. The other thing that I like to snoop around on is how long someone has been with the company. And not just one individual, but just kind of across the board. If everybody has been there over a year, that's a really good sign to me that it's a healthier place to be. So I definitely think that's a strong approach. And then, of course, as many of us know, good old Glassdoor, a lot of reviews and other things. Sometimes there's salary ranges and a little bit of benefits. I definitely do recommend taking a look there, but maybe not always fixating on it, because salty people like to write reviews, and that's going to be in the mix, but can be insightful if you're seeing a theme for sure. And that does happen. But also don't rule a company out completely. And we'll kind of talk about that in the interview, with an interview approach that you and I were talking about earlier with that. But do your research, do a little snooping around. If you know people at the company, definitely set up formal or informal kind of an informational interview to ask some of those questions. That's always working your network is, of course, always a strong approach. So those are some tips on researching a company that at least come to mind for us. Now, drum roll, you figured it out, you sent in your application, and now you've gotten the interview request. So that's kind of an exciting time, but remember those rose-colored glasses also. So Michelle, tell me some thoughts on interviewing and kind of honing in on that.
Yeah, interviews are tough and exciting because obviously you have your questions, they have their questions, so you're trying to figure it all out in a pretty short period of time. So I'd say always come in with kind of a tactical approach of like what questions you want to ask, and sometimes you have to be a little strategic about how you're asking. You can't say like, do you let people take PTO at your company? But maybe you're asking like, when's the last time you went on vacation, or like how much PTO do people use on average, to kind of get at what you're looking for. Going back to work-life balance, maybe you're asking about like, what does flexibility look like at your company, and kind of gauging how they're responding. So I'd say set yourself up with some questions that really dig into like the core things that you would like to find in a company and a team. Maybe you're someone that really wants a clear path for growth too, asking about training opportunities, or what does growth look like for me at this company, if things go well. So I think those are all good questions to kind of get at, the root of what you're hoping to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
As well as just like, what does success look like at this company? Like, how am I going to be measured? I think that's a huge one that can really be telling in terms of like how that team operates and what they're looking for in you before you've even gotten the job. So I guess, Sarah, what other questions are you kind of having come to mind?
I like your approach with that. I feel like you're very good at like reframing things. And so figure out what the answers you're really looking for, and then frame it in a way that gets them to tell you that without being weirdly blunt, I guess. But asking those strong questions is so important, because it really is a two-way street. This really is you feeling out if this is the job that you want. And I know that a lot of people don't feel that. And I know it doesn't feel like that's the reality of this dynamic and this relationship of the interview, but it really is. So yeah, I like to ask questions about kind of what brought people there, what's kept them there. I think those are always good insight. Asking people kind of what are some skills that are lacking on your team? That's really good insight, because then if they say, you know, we don't have anybody who's like super data driven and loves getting into those pivot tables, and you're like, oh, wow, I actually love pivot tables. So that gives you some insight that you can speak to later or speak to in a thank you note, which I'll talk about in a minute. I also like asking them, you know, where do you see me fitting in kind of based on my skills? And where would you see me in 5 years if I stuck around and grew in this company? I think that's all really good insight and shows that you're really interested in being there long term, which is always a good thing. So don't feel uncomfortable asking sort of deeper questions like those, or even about their experience with the company. Just make sure that you frame it in a way that is healthy and that you're just really here to kind of gauge if this is a good fit for you. That's kind of my thoughts. And ultimately, and maybe you already said this, but trust your gut. I think Kelly said that in the comments. I've had interviews where I was like, you know, this feels weird, and I went with it, and it was not the right fit for me. And so sometimes you learn the hard way to trust your gut, but most of us, if we've been working for a few years, have learned that lesson. So just remind yourself of that. Really do trust your gut when you're in that interview, and even sort of decompressing maybe afterwards with friends or colleagues or things like that. So, okay. So that kind of leads us to, you've had the interview, you love the company, you figured that out. This feels really good to you. What can you do next? And none of this is like super rocket science, but I do like to remind people, because I think maybe we learned this in a college class and sort of have waved it off. But a thank you note, a targeted, tailored, personalized, meaningful thank you note goes a really long way. I've even had hiring managers say, you know, I narrowed it down to 2 people and they were both awesome, and then someone wrote me a thank you note, and that tipped the scales. So take the time right after the interview to send that. And it can, of course, be an email in this day and age, but really hone in on, in that thank you note, some things that stood out to you that they shared, whether that was about the company or the specific sort of projects in the pipeline. And then definitely, if you feel like maybe you didn't hone in on a skill enough, this is a chance to kind of reiterate that and connect yourself back to, of course, either some things in the job description that stood out or the company's mission and values, and really painting a picture that you're not just a good fit for the role, but a good fit for the company and what they're doing, I think is really impactful too. And then the other thing I throw in the mix, connect with them on LinkedIn if you haven't already. And if you're thinking about, and this is kind of going back maybe a couple weeks in time, but if you're thinking about applying there, start commenting on their stuff. If they're posting on LinkedIn, really show that you're motivated and engaged. And they're going to see that name repetition too. And that's always a good thing. So those would be kind of some things that I think of when you're kind of wrapping it up and trying to lock it up. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like engaging with them on LinkedIn goes to show like you're super personable, you're excited about them before even applied to something. So
yeah,
definitely.
And I think too, as a recruiter, like that even stands out to me. So that's not really today's topic, but like if you are connecting with us online and engaging with our content as recruiters, that's going to help us kind of have that muscle memory of like, oh yeah, Julie. So just a little tip to throw in the mix.
Yeah, I love that. And obviously this is all, I mean, it's hard. It's hard to figure out job searches and interviews. So if you have other questions, Sarah and I and all the other recruiters at Celarity are here. So feel free to reach out to us after this if you have questions or just want to chat. And Celarity does also have an event tomorrow. So if you're in Minneapolis, we're having an event Wednesday night. It's a summer social. So feel free to join us there as well. I think there will be a registration link in the comments, but thanks for joining.
Thanks, everybody.